Hey everyone, it's Lisa Mears here. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. Today I'm going to be making a fall card using some new products from Pretty Pink Posh's September 2023 release. And the first product I'm going to be using is the pumpkin shaker die set, which looks like this, to make a pumpkin shaker. I'm also going to be bringing in a die set called Stitched Pumpkins. This was released with their August release, and there are 3 different size pumpkins in this set. And you can also use this for Halloween to make jack-o'-lanterns because there's some faces in this set as well. I'll also be using the layered Woodland stencil. This stencil is a 4-layer stencil that has lots of fall leaves. There's also some acorns, so you can make a nice fall background with that set. If you'd like to see the entire Pretty Pink Posh fall release, I will put a link to my unboxing down in the description box below and at the top right hand corner of this video, and you can check that out. And I also want to let you know that this card is part of a Pretty Pink Posh blog hop where you have a chance to win a gift certificate to the Pretty Pink Posh store, and I'll have more information about that blog hop on my blog, and there will be a coordinating link in the description box. So this is the pumpkin shaker die. I went ahead and cut those dies apart, and I want to show you what this cuts. So this die will give you these 3 pieces for your pumpkin. You can use these as the inside of the shaker, or you can even layer them on top of this large piece. So you can see that this large die, it actually puts stitching in that pumpkin. I love all that stitching, but if you wanted to, you can layer those 3 individual pieces on that large die and just add some dimension to it without having to use this die as a shaker. So you don't have to use it as a shaker if you don't want to. So to turn it into a shaker, you'll have to take this die here that has the 3 cutouts and layer it on top of that large pumpkin die cut. And I'm just going to take some mint tape here and hold that die down and run that through my die cut machine. And when I do that, it's going to take those individual pieces out of there, and it's actually going to give me the outline of the pumpkin, and that's what you need to make the shaker, is that outline. And then for the background, you can use those 3 individual layer pieces and use those for the background of your pumpkin. And I always like to do a lighter color cardstock for the background. I think using 2 different colors will give some depth to the pumpkin. So I'm going to go ahead and now use my inks just to add some more depth to this pumpkin. So the actual outline, as you can see, was cut with a darker color teal cardstock, but I am going to add some ink to the edges. I always like to add ink to the edges of my die cuts because it just adds more depth. So the inks that I'm using today are from scrapbook.com, and this ink is the mermaid ink from scrapbook.com. So I'm just using a finger dauber and just adding some ink to the edges. And then I'm also going to add some ink to the lighter teal cardstock that's going to sit in the back of my pumpkin shaker, and I'll do that for all 3 of those pieces. I'm also going to bring in some of the gingerbread ink. This is a light brown ink, and just add a little bit of that brown ink around the edges of the outline piece, because when a pumpkin is sitting in a pumpkin patch, it is a little bit dirty, so I just wanted to get a little bit of that brown ink on there as well. Next, I'm going to use the outline die cut and a piece of acetate. I'm going to glue the outline die cut piece onto the top of the acetate, and this is going to serve as the cover for my shaker pieces when I put them inside of the pumpkin. I'm just using some acrylic blocks to hold that cardstock down to the acetate and let it dry, and then when it's dry completely, I will use my scissors just to trim around the cardstock to trim off the excess acetate. Next, I took this same die again and die cut another pumpkin, just a solid pumpkin, and this time I'm going to glue on those 3 layered pieces to the pumpkin. So this is going to serve as the back of my pumpkin, the part that you will see through the acetate. So once all of those pieces are glued on to the flat pumpkin, I'm going to go ahead and use some foam strips to put on the back of the acetate outline piece. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap around this thin foam so that it has covered the entire back side of that outline pumpkin. I'm going to do all around the edges and all of the inside of that cardstock. And I'm also going to remove the backing off of that foam. So you can see how the foam covers the entire pumpkin on the back side. I'm just going to set that aside for a moment while I grab some shaker pieces. And the shaker pieces that I'm using are the Pretty Pink Posh Matte Gold Confetti Mix. And I'm just going to add the confetti mix on top of that large pumpkin, but I want to make sure that the confetti mix is in the 3 sections of that pumpkin, because when I put that outline cover on top, I don't want any of that confetti mix to be in those individual lines of the pumpkin, because if it is, the foam will rest on top of the confetti mix rather than on the cardstock, and then I won't get a good seal. I need a secure, tight hold with the foam to the cardstock. That's why it's so important to remove all of the confetti mix from those lines. Once I have all of that confetti separated into the 3 sections, I'll go ahead and put the cover piece on top with the foam, and I'll just press that down to make sure it adheres well. And there is my shaker. So now I die cut the stem out of some brown cardstock, and I'm just adding some ink to the edges for some more dimension. I also die cut the leaf, and I die cut that out of green cardstock, and I'm adding some green ink to the edges to add some more dimension to that leaf. And now I'll go ahead and add some glue to the stem and add it behind that pumpkin shaker, and I'm going to do the same thing for the leaf. So that is how you make a pumpkin shaker, but now we need to add this to a card. So in addition to the pumpkin shaker, I'm going to have some flat pumpkins on my card as well. So I used the Stitched Pumpkins die set, and I die cut a couple of pumpkins. I wanted to show you that there's 3 pumpkins in that die set. I die cut all 3 of them, although I'm not going to be using the very small one at the bottom. I'm going to be using the larger one that I'm inking up here, and I'm going to use the medium size one that's in the lighter peach color. So I have one die cut out of orange, and I added some ink to that, and I have another one die cut out of a peachy color cardstock, and I'm adding some ink to that as well. The Stitched Pumpkins die set also includes the stems for those pumpkins as well as leaves, and I'll go ahead and ink up the edges of all of those. Next, I'll go ahead and add the stems to the backs of the pumpkins, and I'll add the leaves as well. So if you use these 2 die sets together, the pumpkin shaker as well as the stitched pumpkins, you'll actually end up with 4 different size pumpkins. So you'll have the large one that I used with the pumpkin shaker, and then you'll have 3 other sizes with the stitched pumpkins. I set all of the pumpkins aside, and now I want to work on my card background. And the card background, I'm going to stencil it using the layered Woodland stencil. And for this first layer of the stencil, this is layer A, I'm using the orange cream ink from scrapbook.com. So I'm inking up all of the leaves on this stencil in orange cream. And since the look that I'm going for the background of my card is a very light pastel look, I am using a very light hand when I add this ink. I'm not pressing it really hard. I don't want this ink really dark, so I'm just adding one layer using a very light hand. So once stencil A is inked up onto my cardstock, I'm going to line up stencil B, and with this stencil I am going to use the driftwood ink. This is a very light brown, and I'm going to ink up the bottoms of the acorns that are on this stencil. And then I'm also going to use the pear ink, and I'm going to add ink to the leaves. Again, using a very light hand to get a very light pastel look. I'm also going to bring in fog, which is a very light gray, and I'm going to ink up the mushrooms that are on this stencil. And notice that I am using a finger dauber rather than a larger ink blending brush, because I knew that I wanted to add ink to only certain areas of the stencil and be able to add different colors to the different parts of the stencil. So by using a small finger dauber, it allows me more control so that I don't spread ink onto other parts of the stencil that I want to color a different color. So this third stencil is actually stencil D. I'm going to come back to stencil C in just a moment. So this stencil has on it all of the stems for the leaves, and there's also some dots for the mushrooms, and I'm using the driftwood ink to color this entire stencil up. So once I finish stencil D, I'm going to remove that and add stencil C, and I'm using the driftwood for the tops of the acorn, but I'm going a little bit heavier on the ink for the tops of the acorn to make it a little bit darker. I'm also coming in with the fog ink, which is the light gray ink for the mushrooms, and then the pear ink to finish up the leaves on this stencil. Okay, so that will finish up this stenciled background, so you can see what that looks like. And by the way, that background was cut with Bristol Smooth cardstock, and it was cut down to 4¼ by 5½ inches. Now I'm just adding some of the driftwood ink around the edges of the entire background to add some more interest. Now I'm ready to put my card together. So I'm going to have 3 pumpkins at the bottom of the card. I'm also using the Thankful shadow die from Pretty Pink Posh. This was also part of their recent September release. I die cut that out of the same brown cardstock that I used for the stems of the pumpkins. So I'm going to add some glue to the back of the word Thankful, and I will add it to the top of the card. Now this die does also include a shadow layer, but I'm not using the shadow layer on that word. And now I'm going to go ahead and add glue to the back of the orange pumpkin and add that behind the other 2 pumpkins, and then I'll just glue the smaller pumpkin down, and then I will glue my shaker. So the shaker will ultimately be on top, since that is the star of the show. So I want to remind you to hop over to my blog at lisamearsdesigns.com. So you can find more information out about my card, as well as the Pretty Pink Posh blog hop that is going on right now for a chance to win a gift certificate to the Pretty Pink Posh store. There will be more details in the description box of this YouTube video for the blog hop. And as always, if you're interested in making a purchase for any of the supplies shown today, I always appreciate when you use my links, because it does help support me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like videos like this, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. And don't forget to turn on your bell notifications so that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.